Nobody feels bad for convicted criminals. They have heinous crimes against their name and deserve to be punished. But some of them, in the last attempt to be excused, decide to cry or have an outburst in court, to make the judge believe they're innocent or to get a jury's verdict in their favor. Either way, judges know their job, and tears and remorse do not work in a court of law. Without further ado, look at the top 8 criminals who burst out crying in court. At number 8, we have Antonio Barbeau. Antonio Barbeau, one of 2 teenagers accused of killing 78-year-old Barbara Olson in her Sheboygan Falls home with a hammer and hatchet in September 2012, was sentenced to life in prison with eligibility for parole in 36 years. Barbeau had previously pleaded not guilty by mental disease or defect, but changed his plea to no contest as part of a plea deal on June 24th. At trial, a psychiatrist testified that Barbeau has cognitive issues stemming from being struck by a car when he was 10, which may have affected his behavior. Barbeau also testified in the trial of his co-accused, Nathan Papp. Despite his young age, Barbeau's crime warranted the harsh sentence of life in prison with the possibility of parole after 36 years. But unfortunately, he could not get through his statement because he burst out crying in court on Monday, so his lawyer finished it for him. At number 7, we have Ashford Thompson. After a shocking demonstration of a childish attitude in court, Ashford Thompson, the black man charged with the murder of Officer Josh Murtarian, was found guilty and sentenced to death. During the trial, Thompson painted himself as a victim and complained to the judge about mistreatment, disregarding the fact that he was the one who had committed the crime. It all started when Officer Murtarian pulled him over for loud music and suspected drunk driving at State Route 91 and Glenwood Drive intersection. When Murtarian tried to handcuff Thompson to place him under arrest, a struggle ensued, and Thompson pulled his gun and shot Murtarian 4 times in the head. In the end, the jury found Thompson guilty, and Judge Stormer declared the death sentence. Clearly, the judge wasn't buying what Thompson was selling, but gave him a week more to prepare, just so any later appeals court wouldn't have an excuse to interfere with justice being served. At number 6, we have Dylan Schumaker. Dylan Schumaker became infamous after a tearful courtroom scene was caught on YouTube. But the reason he was in court should be the focus. When tragedy struck, Dylan was left to babysit his girlfriend's young child, Austin. According to court documents, Schumaker fatally beat the child when he wouldn't stop crying. He was arrested and convicted of murder and child abuse and sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. On the day of his sentencing, Schumaker allegedly told the guards that they should watch the performance he was about to perform in the courtroom. The horrific crime occurred when Schumaker was babysitting Austin and his 3-month-old brother. He admitted to using a pillow to cover Austin's head and punching it to stop the crying and wake his baby brother. The brutal attack ended in Austin's death and left Schumaker facing a long sentence in prison. Dylan Schumaker lived with his mother, Ashley Smith, and her 2 sons in his mother's home on Cochrane Avenue. He was 16 at the time of the attack. Neither of the children was his. At number 5, we have Blake Jefferson. Clad in an orange jumpsuit, Blake Jefferson was overcome with emotion as he made his initial court appearance on Monday morning. The 22-year-old faces charges of murdering his own mother, Alief ISD trustee Dedra Jefferson. More than a dozen family and friends showed up to offer their support, their sobs echoing throughout the courtroom as the judge read out information about Jefferson's bond. After the brief hearing, Jefferson turned and patted his heart in a gesture of appreciation to his supporters. He then let out several loud cries that could be heard outside the courthouse. His bond is set at $50,000. The family's hired attorney could not comment on camera, but released a statement expressing their grief and shock over this tragedy. As the charges against Blake Jefferson remain, the family continues to pray for justice and peace. At number 4, we have Gary Ridgway. Gary Ridgway's brow furrowed in anguish as he listened to the court's horror-filled descriptions of his brutal crimes. Then, nodding occasionally, he tearfully apologized for murdering all those young ladies and begged their families' forgiveness. Judge Richard Jones, however, was not swayed. "The time has come for the final chapter of your reign of terror in our community," Jones declared. "It is now time for our community to have peace from the Green River murders." Although prosecutors agreed to spare Ridgway the death penalty in exchange for his confession and assistance in locating additional victims, Jones delivered a scathing rebuke of Ridgway's lack of compassion and imposed a 48-second moment of silence in honor of his victims. "I have tried to remember as much as I could to help the detectives find and recover the ladies," Ridgway said. bowing his head and sniffling as he read a statement before Jones. The case comes from the Green River in South King County, where the first bodies were found in 1982. By the end of 1984, the death toll rose to 42, and more were still to come, the most recent in 1998. In his confession, Ridgway said that he killed because he hated prostitutes and didn't want to pay them for sex, and that since he killed so many women, he had a hard time keeping them straight. Given their chance to confront Ridgway, relatives of the victims poured forth decades of pain, anger, and loss. At number 3, we have Nicole Kipfmiller. Peter Hodgkins, a 25-year-old from Kiama Downs, New South Wales, has pleaded guilty to maliciously inflicting grievous bodily harm after throwing a rock from an overpass onto a moving car on July 22nd last year. The victim, 22-year-old Nicole Miller, a beauty therapist from Nora, suffered a fractured skull and a brain laceration and was in a coma for 4 days. During sentencing submissions in Wollongong District Court, Mr. Hodgkins expressed remorse and apologized to his victim. He attributed his behavior to the influence of alcohol and a breakdown of his relationship. Mr. Hodgkins also spoke of his mother, a Jehovah's Witness, leaving the family when he was 11, and separation from his partner, which caused him to lose access to his young daughter. He apologized and described his actions as the lowest thing you could do to an innocent person. Miss Miller, who was in the court, broke down crying and was comforted by her mother and boyfriend as she listened. At number 2, we have Amanda Sperduti. A 21-year-old Winston-Salem woman has been sentenced to 7 to 12 years in prison for the deaths of 3 friends killed while she was driving at speeds of up to 90 miles per hour. Amanda Sperduti burst into tears when Judge Edgar Gregory announced the sentence Thursday. Sperduti was asked for leniency after entering an Alford plea, which does not admit guilt but acknowledges there is strong evidence for a conviction. She registered a .2 blood alcohol level after the February 13, 2010 wreck on a winding Guilford County road. The legal limit in North Carolina is .08%. Sperduti apologized in court. She faced 3 counts of aggravated felony death by motor vehicle in the deaths of 23-year-old Scott Bedwell, 18-year-old Sasha Hoffman, and 18-year-old Taylor McCaskill, all of Guilford County. At number 1, we have Jaleel Smith Riley. A Hamilton County judge denied a man's request to change his plea in a 3-year-old murder case in court. Instead, he was sentenced to life without parole. Jaleel Smith Riley, 23, shocked even his attorneys when he requested to change his plea in the shooting and killing of a 22-year-old woman during an attempted robbery. He was back in court to see if his request would be granted. Judge Barry Kubicki denied the request but took the death penalty off the table. Smith Riley sobbed at the hearing Wednesday, repeatedly apologized, and said he made a mistake. In 2013, Smith Riley initially admitted to killing Portia Brooks and injuring her boyfriend in Norwood in 2013. If you liked our content, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more, and let us know in the comments which criminal's display of emotions seemed the fakest.